we have to model resiliency. We have to. In front of our kids, we can't whine and have a pity party and invite them to it. We can't complain all day about the drivers. We can't come home and complain all night about our boss. We have got to show them that we are overcomers and we're not going to sit down in the valleys of our life. We're going to walk out and succeed, even if it's a challenging experience.
Recently, I've been awakened to this fact that there's a lot of people that are concerned with my kids' mental health. There's different counselors and people that are engaged in how they're doing and feeling throughout the course of the day. And then there's even government entities that are trying to curb any negative experiences for them. Everything from social media to what they would experience in school to different things that would be presented to them. It's almost like we really want our kids to have this smooth path for them to walk into their future in. That's not reality. And that's not actually what benefited me as an adult, to go through really hard times and sometimes feeling negative or challenged by different things. It drew me nearer to Christ. What do we do when no one really seems to be concerned about building resiliency for our kids, but they just seem so concerned about building happiness for our kids? Today on the Celebrate Kids podcast, in this daily segment, Facing the Dark, Dr. Kathy illuminates this a little bit for us, helps us think well of these challenging things that our kids might experience, and helps us understand how we can build resiliency with them so they can go on and actually encounter and overcome big challenges in their life. So let's turn now to Dr. Kathy Cook.
Don't be afraid of the dark. Be careful with stars. Not every light is gonna guide you, baby. Not every light is gonna guide you.
So, Dr. Kathy, helping your children develop the resilience to handle life's inevitable setbacks is the key to raising them into happy and successful adults. That's something that Dr. Tova Klein has written about recently. She goes on to say that there are basically 5 ways to build resiliency in kids. She highlights them as building trust, teaching kids to regulate their emotions, helping them build independence, leading them to connect with others, and helping them to see that they're being understood by us as adults. Now, Dr. Kathy, I bring this up because resiliency is something that I think is really lacking. I think as a culture, I would even say me, myself, I struggle with resiliency sometimes. But I think also then it gets passed on to our kids, and it's easier to identify it in our kids than it might be into us. But you wrote an entire book on resiliency, and I want to hear a little bit of why you wrote that book on resiliency. Why is this something that should be focused on as parents, especially in this cultural moment?
Right, thanks. I started writing the book during the COVID crisis when I was so concerned that our young people would kind of define their whole existence by what they did not have. They were beginning to define themselves by the prom they missed, the tournament they missed, the piano recital they missed, the band concert they missed, the year in school they missed. And I totally get that. And yet I didn't want that for them going forward because they still had a lot that I wanted them to know about. I also wrote the book because technology is causing, especially our young people, to believe that everything should be easy and automatic and easy to fix. There's the autocorrect feature and the reboot feature. So there's a laziness. They admit to me that they X out of games they might lose. They don't like working harder to try to win, or they just don't want to have the loss on their heart. And that's going to make them weak and not really able to step up to the challenges that an academic life requires or that a life requires of them. In this cultural moment, we have to talk with our kids about walking through the valleys and not sitting down.
Dr. Kathy, I do really like that. But I want to ask you about these ideas of resiliency that Dr. Klein talked about. There were 5 that I read earlier. This idea of building trust and teaching kids to regulate their emotions and helping them build independence and leading them to connect with others and then helping them to see that they're understood. What do you think of these as ideas for building resiliency in kids? And is there anything that you'd like to add to them?
I would love to add to them. I think the ideas are strong. I think specifically the teaching kids to regulate emotions. My fear about non-resilient children is they don't know how to handle disappointment, fear, frustration, loss, grief, shame. They're not resilient emotionally. So we need to help them not really regulate emotions as much as I think they need to understand the emotion and not be fearful of it. And then obviously to handle it appropriately, which is what the word regulate would mean. I would add to the list things like they have to be able to struggle some. We can't rescue them too soon. If we are fearful that they will make mistakes and make us look bad, then boy, we got to get over that, because if we don't let them make some mistakes while they're in the safety of our home, they may crumble and burn the day that they ultimately do make mistakes, because they will make them. We need to teach them that perfection isn't necessary, and it's often not even possible. So mistakes are okay. In fact, I had kids say to me, well, if we always learn from our mistakes, why are we so afraid to make them? I've sometimes recommended to people that they buy a huge eraser that you can find at the dollar store and put it in the middle of the table. And why is that there, mommy? It's a reminder that we're all going to make mistakes, and it's okay. It's a part of life and a part of learning. They also, Wayne, another thing that's important for us to overcome the lack of resiliency is that we need to know our strengths so that we can rely on them. If kids aren't resilient, it means that they don't recover from their difficulties. They sit down in the valleys and they don't work hard, and they don't ask for help, and they don't, step out and try new things. And they often don't do that because they don't know their strengths. If they're not resilient, we've probably yelled at them about not being resilient. Why don't you try harder? And why are you always giving up? Those questions don't help them not give up. So they need to know their strengths so they can overcome the challenges. And then we need to be available when they're confused. Evidence of resiliency is that we ask for help. You and I have established in our working relationship here at Celebrate Kids, I think a very healthy relationship where we are willing to ask for help. You have made it clear to me that if I don't understand something on the technology side or something you've asked me to complete, that you're never bothered by a question. And I really appreciate that, because if I couldn't ask you for help and clarification, then I'd be at a loss and I would be fearful, and I don't want to disappoint you. So we need to be available to our kids so that when they're confused, they can ask help, and we will answer their questions without shaming them. Now, if they haven't been attentive and they've been lazy and they were multitasking when they should have been one-on-one attentive, call sin sin. But many times it's just that they're young and they're inexperienced and they're overwhelmed and they're fearful. And they come and they go, Daddy, I'm so sorry, but I don't remember. What did you want me to do next? The words out of our mouth in that moment can hurt them deeply, or heal any fear that's there, and say, man, thanks for trusting me. I'm so glad that you wanted to get it right. I'd like you to do this next. And you don't even have to say, next time, listen closer. Just give them the answer and let them skip away and have a good experience. And the next time you train them to do something in order, remind them, now, what are we going to do first? And what are we going to do second? But in that moment, just reward him for his courage by giving him the answer so he can succeed, which is what he ultimately wants to do. And then one more thing, Wayne, we have to model resiliency. We have to. In front of our kids, we can't whine and have a pity party and invite them to it. We can't complain all day about the drivers. We can't come home and complain all night about our boss. We have got to show them that we are overcomers, and we're not going to sit down in the valleys of our life. We're going to walk out and succeed, even if it's a challenging experience.
I love that, Dr. Kathy. It makes me think of this idea of where we feel like we're resilient, right? Sometimes I think that as adults, we can kind of feel like we're trudging through life, or we're being resilient. So we sit back and kick our slippers off. Maybe, I don't know if you wear slippers, sometimes probably I do. And then we can kind of like put our hands behind our head and say, we were resilient today. We pushed through this hard thing at the office. But I wonder if we ever look at our kids and say, they're resilient, right? Or we identify it, or we even take that minute. Sometimes I think it's natural for us to highlight how they're not resilient. And in that, we will, say that they haven't achieved something that we want them to do. And so we just say, oh, you got to toughen up, or rub some dirt on it, or come on, buttercup, get at it, a little bit. Is there a benchmark that we should be looking at to gauge how our kids are doing with resiliency? And is there even a way, or some different like resilient things that they might do that we could celebrate to maybe help them see that they are resilient, that it's a character trait that they have, or a muscle they have that might need to be worked out a little bit? What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I love this. In my newest book, Parent Differently, Raise Kids with Biblical Character That Changes Culture, resiliency is in the top 13 baker's dozen of the most important character qualities to develop in our children. This ability to work at something that is challenging the first time. So it is valuable for us to look for it showing up and call it out and say, man, thanks for being resilient. What's that mean, mommy? It means that you didn't give up and you tried again. I'm so proud of you. And then the dad comes home. What did you learn today? Daddy, I learned I'm resilient. Like, that's way more valuable than 2 + 2 = 4. When we assign character values to our children, it changes them. What's the evidence of resiliency. They whine less. They're not as fearful. They confidently ask for help. They are willing to try new things. They don't panic when they see that something might be new or challenging. They're not upset every time they have to erase and start over. They begin to understand that learning requires that strategy of overcoming the first mistake. And they learn more. If you're not resilient and you sit down when things are hard, you're going to plateau academically and spiritually, mentally, physically, in every way. So they learn more, and the relationships are stronger. Kids who are not resilient, who give up quickly, don't give up just in the academic circle. They give up on God. They give up on people. Oh, that guy hurt me. I'm not going to pay attention to him anymore. But when you raise kids to understand that hurts are a part of growing up, and this is how we handle the hurts. We know when to walk away. We know when to give somebody a second chance. We know when to ask to be forgiven and when to forgive. When we teach those skills, then they can even become resilient relationally. And this is what we want. Every relationship has bumps in the road. And we have to teach our kids that they can even overcome those.
I really appreciated what Dr. Kathy had to say today. It reminded me of a passage that comes out of Genesis chapter 20, and I'll begin reading at verse 15. When Joseph's brothers saw that their father was dead, they said, "It may be that Joseph will hate us and pay us back for all the evil that we did to him." So they sent a message unto Joseph, saying, "Your father gave us commands before he died. Say to Joseph, please forgive the transgression of your brothers and their sin, because they did evil to you. And now please forgive the transgression of the servants of the God of your father." Joseph wept when he spoke to them, and he said, "Don't fear, for am I in the place of God? And as for you, you meant evil against me, but God meant it for good, to bring it about that many people should be kept alive, as they are today. So don't fear, I will provide for you and your little ones." Thus he comforted them and spoke kindly to them. Joseph's life, from being sold into slavery by his brothers to becoming a ruler in Egypt, is really a remarkable story of resilience. His ability to stay faithful and rise through hardship reveals that God's hand was in all of the adversity, bringing about an amazing purpose that shone brightly in a dark and challenging time. I wonder if we give our kids opportunities to build muscles to overcome little obstacles and continue to do that as they grow up and continue on in maturity. I wonder if helping our kids see that obstacles aren't something to be maybe avoided, but something to overcome, maybe something to face and to rely on the Lord for. I wonder if helping our kids see that obstacles aren't something to be avoided can really bring a bright light that helps them shine and cut through some dark times that they might be feeling or experiencing as they encounter adversity. I hope that's an encouragement for you, and I hope this podcast is an encouragement for you. I want to thank you for listening to the Celebrate Kids podcast, this daily segment, Facing the Dark. On behalf of Dr. Kathy Cook, my name is Wayne Stender. We're really thankful that you're joining us this week, and we're looking forward to seeing you here again tomorrow.